Good afternoon. I'm Michael Sanders, and this broadcast is coming to you from the auditorium at Canterbury Wood in Pacific Grove. Today, I'd like to do two things. First of all, I'd like to play for you the Bach Suite in F major. That's, if you're keeping track, that is BWV 809. It's one of 6 suites that are known as English suites, and I'll have a word or two to say about that name later. The other thing I'd like to do is to preface each of the 6 movements of Bach's suite with a popular song about England, English songs, in other words. And I'll begin the whole program then with an English patriotic song written by Edward Elgar. Elgar is probably the greatest of the English composers after the Elizabethan period. So the story is that Elgar had a tremendous popular success with the first of his pomp and circumstance marches. That was in 1901. His friend, Edward VII, King Edward VII, had become king when his mother, Queen Victoria, died at the beginning of 1901. King Edward was king, but he hadn't been crowned, and he wasn't to be crowned until June of the following year, 1902. So King Edward told his friend, you know, the slow section of your pomp and circumstance march would make a really good song. And I suppose if your king tells you that a piece you've written would be a good song, you would be wise to pay attention to that. In any case, Elgar was asked to write music for the coronation for the following year, and he planned to use this slow section of the Pomp and Circumstance March in it. Well, not long before the scheduled coronation in June of 1902, King Edward came down with appendicitis, which at that time was very dangerous and almost entirely untreatable condition. Many people died of it. But King Edward's surgeons wanted to perform surgery on him, and they did. Surgery involved cutting through 4.5 inches of belly fat. And it was so successful that the next day King Edward was sitting up in his hospital bed smoking a cigar. And the rescheduled coronation took place in August, and at that was Elgar's coronation ode, which included the portion that with the words "Land of Hope and Glory." And just that section of the ode has become very popular. Some people call it the second national anthem for England. It became popular also in the United States, but under the title Pomp and Circumstance. Nobody who's ever been to an American high school graduation has gone without hearing the Pomp and Circumstance March, though that portion to which people march in or out is only the slow section of the march. In any case, I'd like to play for you now Land of Hope and Glory by Edward Elgar. Thank you. Now I'll turn to Bach. There are 6 suites written by Bach that are known as the English suites, but I don't think anybody really quite knows why. Bach's oldest sons told Bach's biographer that they were given that name because an Englishman had ordered them and paid for them. But that actually seems a rather unlikely story. Bach was in Weimar. It's hard to imagine what an Englishman might have been doing going around commissioning music. Bach was not a famous composer. And the music has never turned up in any English library. So another possibility is maybe that some of the suites, though not the one I'm going to play, seem to have been inspired by a French composer who had a certain popularity in England, though he was not by any means English himself. So that conceivably the explanation. They do not sound like any English Baroque music of the time. Well, it doesn't really matter. They're all wonderful pieces. They are mostly sound French to me, but the first movements, the preludes with which all those suites begin, are, I think, highly influenced by Italian Baroque. In fact, by the Italian concertos and concerto grossos of the time. So this first movement is inspired, I think, by the Italian Baroque spirit, and it forms an introduction, the only non-dance movement in the suite. So here's the prelude from the English suite in F major by Bach. Thank you. Now I'd like to play a song by the Gershwin brothers, the music by George, the words by Ira. It was part of a very successful television, movie musical called Damsels in Distress. And it was sung by Fred Astaire to great success. This is A Foggy Day in London Town. And a foggy day, of course, is one of those pea soup days that make the Sherlock Holmes mysteries so atmospheric, but unfortunately also frequently fatal when the smog became polluted with industrial pollutants. Nevertheless, in this song, foggy day clears up when the man gets his love. So here is A Foggy Day in London Town by the Gershwins. Now we'll turn to the first of the actual dance movements of this Bach suite. This is an allemande. Allemande is a French word which actually means German, as in German dance. So the dance was borrowed by the French, and then later on the Germans borrowed it back from the French. It's an elaborately danced piece done in groups of 4 couples arranged around a square. And they have intricate interlacings and movements together, and the music itself is always quite intricate and interlacing. That might sound a little bit like American folk dance. And you may remember that the caller for a folk dance is likely to end a section with the words Allemande left and do-si-do home. And so maybe there is some connection between the Allemande and folk dance, square dancing. In any case, here is the Allemande from the English suite in F by Bach. Thank you. Now I'd like to play one of two pieces that actually come not from London, but from Liverpool. Now, Liverpool is not probably at the top of most tourists' list of beauty spots to visit in Great Britain, but if you are a Beatles fan, that probably is your very #1 choice. So this song, written by the Beatles, particularly by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, is called Penny Lane. And Penny Lane is a street in Liverpool where the young future Beatles spent a lot of their time. So this song, it's a little interesting that the Beatles decided that what they wanted in this music was a little bit of the Baroque Bach sound. And in fact, they had a studio musician play the piccolo trumpet as part of an interlude, and at the end, you'll hear the piano version of that as I play this piece. So the Beatles were constantly inventing and trying new things, and this is a little bit of Baroque in the middle of Liverpool. Here is Penny Lane by McCartney and Lennon. Thank you. Now I'd like to play the Courante from the English suite. There is a parting of the ways always in these Bach suites, a choice anyway, between two versions of this dance. One is called courant, and the other one is called corrente. They both come from the same original etymology. Courant means running in French, and corrente means running in Italian. The Italians, for some reason, run quite a bit faster than the French do. This is a dance that's danced in couples, and originally there was a running step, but it became more domesticated into kind of sliding step. I like the description that Johann Mattheson, who was a contemporary Bach writer about music, said that the courant is chiefly characterized by the passion or mood of sweet expectation. For there is something heartfelt, something longing and also gratifying in this melody, clearly on music on which hopes are built. So here is the courant from the English Suite in F by Bach. Thank you. Now, perhaps Walt Disney's most successful live-action movie ever was Mary Poppins. And after its initial success, Disney was very eager to make a sequel. After all, the English author had written, P.L. Travers, had written 8 volumes in this series. And so there was a lot of material to work with. Well, unfortunately, Travers hated the movie. And except for liking Julie Andrews in the title role, she didn't like much of anything about it. So she was willing, however, to take the extensive royalties that were the result of the success of that movie. Anyway, for the rest of Disney's life and Travers' life, they sporadically tried to negotiate some kind of movie version. But Travers' demands were so extreme and almost irrational that nothing could be worked out. For example, one draft of her requirements was that Mary Poppins was not to wear red in the movie. So, however, 54 years later, probably the longest interval ever between a movie and its sequel, after both Travers and Disney were dead, the estate and the company were able to put together Mary Poppins Returns. It was not as great a success. I mean, it would never have been. But there were some good songs, and at least one song that I think is quite wonderful. It is called Underneath the Lovely London Sky. It's sung at the beginning of the movie, to set the movie, by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And as he wanders around early in the morning, turning off the lamps of London. It was written by Mark Shyman and Scott Whitman. And here is Underneath the Lovely London Sky. Next in Bach's suite comes the saraband. Saraband is a dance with a kind of checkered history. It began in Europe, at least in Spain, but it seems to have been borrowed either from the Arabs or even more surprisingly, from Mexico. In any case, it was quite a lively dance with castanets and the two rows of dancers dancing opposite each other. It became severely toned down, especially in France, and it became one of the noblest and least raucous of all the dances. For Bach, I think the saraband is the spiritual center of the suite, and it's here that he expresses his most profound and, I think, touching thoughts. So here's the saraband from the English Suite in F by Bach. Thank you. Now, on the back side of the double single recording that the Beatles released. This was not unusually in one of their albums. The back side of Penny Lane was the song Strawberry Fields Forever. Strawberry Fields was the name of a Salvation Army children's home. And members of the Beatles played in the gardens of that establishment as children. And the song makes reference to those. The songs were, this song was in flux for a long time. It took something like 45 hours of studio time to record it. It was recorded in three quite different versions, and the final version was a combination of several of the original versions. Oddly enough, it was not immediately popular in the way that Penny Lane was. There's something about the fact that there is no driving rhythm that connects the whole song. The motives are detached, and there are pauses between the sections. Doesn't sound a whole lot like rock and roll. But I think people have come to love this as much as anything else in the canon of Beatles songs. So here now is Strawberry Fields Forever. Thank you. Now, at this point in the Bach suite, Bach makes a choice from one of several different kinds of dances he called galanteries. They were more, perhaps, up-to-date, fashionable dances. In this case, the dances are minuets. He makes two of them, one in F and one in the relative minor, D minor. And then by tradition, after the first minuet and the second minuet, the first minuet is played again. Now, I suppose that the minuet is the only one of the Baroque dances that survived into the next period of music history, into the classical period. Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, all wrote minuets in their, essentially in all of their instrumental music until later on Beethoven moved from the minuet into a similar but faster and livelier dance, the scherzo. So here are the two minuets from the English suite in F by Bach. Thank you. One more English popular song. This became immensely popular in 1942, in the darkest days of the Second World War. Vera Lynn sang it. This is The White Cliffs of Dover. It was written by two Americans, Nat Burton and Walter Kent. They may not have been aware that there are no bluebirds in Dover. Or maybe they knew that, but just like the image of hope and optimism that bluebirds flying over the white cliffs of Dover presented. In time, it also became a kind of symbol of first the American and then the Royal Air Force pilots taking off from England, flying across the English Channel to do battle in Europe. Many, of course, never returned. We here at Canterbury Woods are so lucky to have quite an English contingent here among the residents, English and members of the Commonwealth. And one of those people who especially loved this song is Doris Beach, who died last year. And so in her honor, and in honor of all of our English residents, English, who make this such a nice community to be in, I'd like to play now White Cliffs of Dover by Burton and Kent. Well, I'd like to thank Keith Chase for his efforts in so many aspects of our life here in the community, and all the labor involved in setting up and recording and processing, and then handing it over to Blanca Diaz and Jobin Snare, who are primarily responsible for getting it onto Canterbury Woods television. Keith also prepares the YouTube posting for those people who listen to it, not on television, but through their computers. So to end, I'll end with the final movement of the English suite in F. This is the Gigue. A gigue is from the British Isles, a jig, Irish and Scottish mostly. It transported to France, where it got a little bit of culture, and brought to Germany, where it got a whole lot of counterpoint from Bach. He does what he often does with a gigue subject. The first half, the tune goes in one direction. Second half, the tune is set in the opposite direction, what we call inversion. And in this gigue, the inverted and the normal versions are combined in all the contrapuntal ways that Bach could think of. So here is the gigue from the English suite in F to end this program.